At my mom's retirement, I was seated alone in the hallway. Seats are limited to important guests, Mom said. So I picked up my gift and left. 2 weeks later, I served them with a letter that made them panic. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit! So I attended my mom's retirement party, bought her an $800 gift just to be seated in the hallway like a freaking outsider. I didn't say a word. I just sent them a letter demanding they pay back every loan they ever took from me. This is how it went down. I, 31 male, learned at an early age exactly where I ranked in my family's pecking order. Dead last. My dad, 67 male, spent 30 years as a regional manager for a construction equipment company, strutting around town like he personally built every subdivision within 50 miles. Mom, 66 female, worked as the head nurse at the prestigious local hospital, where she spent more time networking than actually helping patients. They were solidly middle class, but acted like they were members of some secret society just waiting for their invitation to the Hamptons. The hierarchy was painfully obvious from the time I was about 8. My younger brother Charlie, 27 male, was the golden child who could take a shit on the dinner table, and my parents would praise him. My sister Olivia, 29 female, existed in the diplomatic middle, not openly favored, but never the disappointment. Then there was me, the family workhorse. I became a mechanic straight out of high school, working my way up to shop manager at a high-end garage in the city. I make good money, enough to live comfortably while saving for the future. We're talking $115,000 a year plus bonuses, which in our mid-sized Midwestern city goes pretty far. I've got a solid 401k, health benefits, and 3 weeks of vacation. But in my parents' eyes, getting your hands dirty fixing German sports cars was barely a step above being unemployed. Apparently, real success only counts if you're wearing a tie and working in a corner office. Charlie dropped out of community college after 2 semesters because the system was designed to crush creativity. He's lived at home rent-free for the past 7 years, cycling through part-time jobs and half-baked startup ideas. The longest he ever held a job was 8 months at a coffee shop, before quitting because the manager didn't respect his process. His latest brilliant venture? A subscription service for curated wellness experiences that was really just overpriced tea samples he bought in bulk from Alibaba. Pure genius, that one. Meanwhile, I was the guy who fixed their cars for free, helped them move furniture, installed their new appliances, and somehow became their personal IT department. Every time Dad got a virus from clicking on sketchy email links, guess who spent their weekend cleaning up his computer? Every time Mom accidentally deleted important files, guess who had to recover them? And yet whenever I mentioned work achievements, they'd immediately change the subject. Olivia saw through their bullshit but played Switzerland. She'd text me after family gatherings. Sorry they were such assholes today. But she never said anything when it mattered. I got it. Speaking up meant painting a target on your back. I met my girlfriend Jess, 29 female, about 3 years ago when she brought in her BMW for service. She's a software developer who actually appreciates mechanical skill and doesn't mind a guy with some grease under his fingernails. She drives a 435i that she maintains meticulously. The kind of client who actually follows the recommended service schedule and doesn't wait until something breaks. We clicked immediately. She's smart, doesn't take shit from anyone, and has called my parents on their behavior more than once. She saw through their facade within 5 minutes of meeting them. Your parents are using you, she told me, after witnessing an especially uncomfortable family dinner where my dad not so subtly hinted about needing money for a new roof. You realize that's messed up, right? I did, but some twisted sense of obligation kept me chained to them. That and the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd eventually see me. The first loan happened when I was 25. I'd been at the garage for 7 years and had finally saved up a decent emergency fund, about $14,000. That's when my parents refinanced their house to pay for a kitchen renovation that spiraled out of control. Instead of scaling back, they doubled down with high-end appliances and custom cabinets they couldn't afford. The call came while I was finishing up an engine rebuild on a 911 Turbo. Ronnie, we're in a bit of a pickle, my mother said, her voice calculated to hit that perfect balance of casual and desperate. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I transferred $10,000 that night. The agreement was they'd pay me back in monthly installments starting in 6 months. I'm sure you can guess how many payments I received. Exactly 0. Shocking, I know. A month after my loan, Dad showed up at a family dinner sporting a new Omega watch. When I asked about it, he mentioned it was a gift to himself for managing such a stressful situation with the bank. The watch easily cost $3,000. Must be nice to treat yourself with someone else's money. The second financial hit came when Charlie totaled his car, wrapped it around a tree while texting, miraculously uninjured, but totally uninsured. Another call, another $7,500 out of my savings for a replacement vehicle, so he can get to his new job. Charlie got the car, I got the debt. What really twisted the knife was seeing Charlie post pictures of his new ride on Instagram, positioning himself as some kind of self-made success. Grind never stops was the caption. Yeah, the grind of mooching off your brother while drinking $7 lattes and pretending you're hustling. While I was working 50-hour weeks, Charlie was sleeping until noon and spending his afternoons networking at local cafes. This networking consisted primarily of hitting on baristas and trying to recruit people into his various pyramid schemes. He once tried to sell me on investing in some crypto project he was consulting for. When I asked basic questions about the tokenomics and use case, he told me I was too locked into outdated financial paradigms. The guy couldn't balance a checkbook, but was lecturing me on finance. The biggest hit came 3 years ago. Dad got scammed on some investment scheme his golf buddy recommended. Something about cryptocurrency mining equipment that turned out to be complete bullshit. They were facing liens on their property and possibly worse. This time, the ask was for $25,000. I had been saving for a house. Jess and I were talking about moving in together, and I wanted to have a solid down payment. I'd been eyeing a property in a decent neighborhood with good schools and reasonable property taxes. I'd done all the math, calculated mortgage rates, and was weeks away from making an offer. All that planning went out the window when Dad called, voice shaking, talking about potential bankruptcy. I transferred the money after getting a signed agreement, finally wised up, that they would repay in full with interest within 18 months. I drafted it myself, had it notarized, and made sure the terms were crystal clear. For once, they seemed genuinely grateful. 18 months came and went. When I brought it up, my father acted like I'd pissed on his grave. Family helps family, Ronnie. We'd do the same for you. But they wouldn't. And we all knew it. I know, most of you are thinking, why TF would you even help them? When you grow up being the invisible kid, you get stuck thinking if you do enough, they'll finally give a damn. Stupid move. Took me too long to snap out of it, but I did. But the worst part, though? Every time I visited my parents' house, there was some new luxury item. A Vitamix blender. A Peloton bike that Mom used twice before it became an expensive clothes rack. A massive Weber grill for Dad's BBQ hobby that he abandoned after 2 months. All while I was getting texts asking if I could chip in for property taxes or unexpected medical bills. I later discovered they'd been taking vacations they never mentioned to me. Weekend getaways to resorts, a cruise to Alaska, even a 2-week trip to Italy that I only found out about through Olivia's Facebook, all while claiming they couldn't even make token payments on what they owed me. My best friend Marcus saw the situation clearly. We'd been tight since high school auto shop, and he'd watched the pattern play out for years. Marcus owns his own body shop now and has zero tolerance for bullshit. Dude, they're treating you like their backup plan, he told me bluntly over wings one night at the local sports bar. They know you'll always cave, so they don't even try to handle their shit anymore. Why would they? They've got you. Jess was even more direct. Your parents are emotional vampires, she said. They'll drain you completely if you let them. I knew they were right, but breaking away seemed impossible. Years of conditioning had me believing I somehow owed them this endless support. The irony wasn't lost on me, my parents who preached financial responsibility while having none themselves. The first serious crack in my resolve came during Thanksgiving last year. I'd spent 3 hours making a bourbon pecan pie from scratch because my mom mentioned wanting one. When I arrived, she barely acknowledged it. Oh, you brought dessert. We already have plenty, but I'm sure someone will eat it. The plenty was store-bought pumpkin pies that sat alongside my homemade creation. Throughout dinner, my parents fawned over Charlie's latest business breakthrough, a dropshipping scheme selling knockoff fitness equipment. When I mentioned the classic Porsche I was restoring as a side project, my dad cut me off. Speaking of cars, Charlie needs new tires for winter. Ronnie, you get those at cost, right? I nodded mechanically, feeling Jess squeeze my knee under the table. The message was clear. My achievements weren't worth discussing, but my utility was always relevant. After dinner, Charlie cornered me in the kitchen. Mom said you've been difficult about the money thing. Don't be such a jerk, man. It's just money. Just money. My money. About $42,500 of it over the years, to be exact. But hey, who's counting? That weekend, I started compiling documentation. Bank transfers, text messages, emails, anything that provided evidence of these loans. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but something in me had shifted. I was done. I also started saying no to small requests. When Mom called asking me to come set up their new smart TV, I told her I was busy. When Dad asked me to help him move some furniture, I recommended a moving service. Each refusal was met with guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments. But I held firm. The dynamic shifted almost immediately. Suddenly, I was getting calls from relatives I barely spoke to, asking why I was abandoning my parents. Charlie started posting vague social media comments about ungrateful siblings. Olivia warned me that I was the main topic at every family dinner I didn't attend. Good. Let them talk. For the first time in my life, I wasn't dancing to their tune, and it felt like finally taking a full breath after years of suffocating. The final straw wasn't even about money. It was about something more fundamental: my place in the family. My mom's retirement party was scheduled for June. The event was being held at the country club where my parents couldn't afford a membership, but had somehow finagled the venue through one of Mom's former patients. Professional event planner, custom invitations, photographer, the works. Nothing but the best for Queen Elizabeth's retirement. I received my invitation 3 weeks before the event. I RSVP'd yes despite my misgivings. I even got her a thoughtful gift, a vintage nursing textbook from the 1950s that I'd tracked down through a collector. It cost me nearly $800 and took months to find. It was the exact edition she'd mentioned wanting years ago for her office. Jess offered to come as moral support, but had a work conference she couldn't miss. "Call me the second you want to leave," she insisted. "I don't care what time it is." I arrived exactly on time, parked my reasonably clean Civic among the Audis and BMWs, and headed inside. The ballroom was decked out with elaborate floral arrangements, a string quartet played in the corner, and servers circulated with drinks. All funded by my parents who couldn't afford their mortgage without my help. Makes perfect sense. I spotted my mother holding court near the center of the room, wearing what was clearly a new designer dress. Dad stood beside her, chest puffed out like a peacock. Charlie was nearby, already 3 drinks in and loudly telling some story to a group of nurses. Olivia saw me first and hurried over. "Ronnie, you made it," she said, giving me a quick hug. Her expression was tense. "Mom was just asking if you were coming." I held up the wrapped book. "Wouldn't miss it. Where should I put her gift?" "There's a table by the entrance," she said, then lowered her voice. "Listen, there's been some issue with the seating chart." Before she could finish, Mom spotted me and waved imperiously. I made my way over, navigating through clusters of people I didn't recognize. "Ronnie, you're here." Mom air-kissed near my cheek. Her perfume was suffocating. "Don't you look adequate?" The pause was deliberate, like she'd been practicing it. I handed her the carefully wrapped package. "Happy retirement, Mom." She took it with a perfunctory smile and immediately passed it to a server without even looking at it. "Put that with the others, please." To me, the Harrisons just arrived. I should greet them. Dad gave me that familiar clap on the shoulder, the quick double tap that always felt dismissive. "Good to see you, son." And then he was gone too, chasing after someone with a country club membership. Charlie sauntered over, drink in hand. Well, well. The grease monkey cleaned up. His words were already slurred. "Didn't think you'd pry yourself away from your precious engines? Or could you actually afford to take a night off?" "Not now, Charlie," I warned. He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just saying hi to my big brother. Don't be so touchy." He wandered back to his audience, probably to tell them how he'd soon be a millionaire from selling counterfeit protein powder. I grabbed a water from a passing server and took stock of the room. At least 150 people, many of whom I'd never seen before. The cost of this party could have easily paid back at least half of what my parents owed me. I spotted several hospital administrators, a couple of doctors I recognized from previous events, and various country club types with that distinct look of old money. People began moving toward the elegantly set tables. I looked for my name card, moving from table to table. All the important guests were seated near the front. Mom's boss, hospital board members, colleagues she actually liked. Charlie was at the head table with my parents. So was Olivia, looking uncomfortable. My name wasn't at any of these tables. I kept searching, moving toward the back of the room. Did they actually forget to set a place for me? That's when I noticed the event planner consulting her clipboard near the ballroom doors. I approached her, keeping my voice casual. "Excuse me, I can't seem to find my seat." She checked her list, frowning slightly. "Oh, you're her son?" When I nodded, she brightened. "Yes, there's been a slight overflow issue. You'll be seated in the atrium just outside once dinner begins." "The atrium?" I repeated. "Outside the ballroom?" "Yes, we have a small table set up out there. It's quite nice, right by the fountain." I thanked her and walked toward the atrium. It was a small space between the ballroom and the main lobby. A single cocktail table had been set up with one chair. No place setting, no centerpiece. Just a chair at a bare table, like I was the freaking coat check guy. I stood there staring at that solitary chair when I heard my mother behind me. Oh, good, Ronnie. You found your spot. I turned to face her. A cocktail table in the hallway? By myself? She gave that familiar sigh, the one that had made me feel small my entire life. We had limited seating in the main room. We had to prioritize. I'm sure you understand. Limited seating? I gestured toward the open doors where I could see at least a dozen empty chairs. There's plenty of room. Those seats are for people who RSVP'd properly, she said, a slight edge entering her voice. I RSVP'd 3 weeks ago, I countered. Well, there must have been some mix-up. She waved her hand dismissively. It's just dinner, Ronnie. Don't make a scene. So, you're telling me that at your retirement party, there's no space for me? Your son? She glanced nervously over her shoulder. People are waiting, Ronnie. Just sit here for dinner, and you can join us for dancing afterward. At that moment, something broke inside me. Not with a dramatic snap, but with the quiet finality of something that had been deteriorating for years, finally giving way. No, I said simply. Her eyes widened in surprise. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not sitting in the hallway like some embarrassing secret while you pretend to be something you're not. To people you're desperate to impress. Her face flushed. You're making a scene. No, you made a statement. Putting me out here was a statement about where I rank in your life. Below Charlie, below your work friends, below appearances. I've been your backup plan for years, and I can't even get a seat at your table? That's not true. It is true. And you know what? I'm done. I've been done for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. I walked past her, back into the ballroom. I passed the gift table and took back the package I'd brought. If she couldn't be bothered to acknowledge it, I couldn't be bothered to give it. Dad intercepted me, his face reddening. Where do you think you're going? Your mother is upset. Good, I replied. She should be. I kept walking, ignoring the curious stares. As I reached the exit, I heard Charlie's loud voice. Classic Ronnie, always has to make it about himself. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, the book under my arm. In my car, I called Jess. They put me at a goddamn cocktail table in the hallway, I said when she answered. Not even in the room. A cocktail table by myself. Those assholes, she said, genuinely angry. I knew something like this would happen. Are you okay? Yeah. I think I finally get it now. This is never going to change. So what are you going to do about it? She asked. I started the car. Something I should have done a long time ago. At home, I pulled out the folder I'd been compiling for nearly a year. Bank statements showing transfers to my parents' accounts. Emails confirming the nature of these loans. The signed agreement for the final $25,000 with its repayment schedule that had been completely ignored. Jess had been telling me to prepare for this day. I just hadn't been ready to face it until now. I called Marcus and told him what happened. Jesus Christ, he muttered. That's low, even for them. I'm doing it, I told him. The thing we talked about. I'm going nuclear. There was a brief silence. You sure about this? It's going to get ugly. It's already ugly, I replied. Has been for years. I spent the next day going through every email, every text, every bank statement. I created a detailed timeline of financial transactions, promises made and broken, payment schedules ignored. I had screenshots of Charlie's Instagram posts showing extravagant purchases made while my parents claimed they couldn't repay me. I had recordings of phone calls where they explicitly referred to the money as loans they would definitely pay back. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer Marcus had recommended months ago. Ellen specialized in civil litigation. She had cropped gray hair, wore suits that meant business, and didn't waste words on pleasantries. She reviewed my documentation without judgment. You have a strong case here, she said, adjusting her glasses, especially for the most recent loan with the signed agreement. The earlier ones are less clear-cut but still recoverable given the evidence and pattern. I want it all back, I said firmly. Every penny. We'll start with a formal demand letter, she explained. If they refuse to comply, we'll file suit and potentially seek an attachment on their property. But I had something else in mind. Something more comprehensive. It wasn't enough to just get my money back. I wanted to make absolutely sure they could never exploit me or anyone else again. Before we send anything, I need to know something, I said. If they've been using my money to support their lifestyle while refusing to repay me, does that constitute fraud? Ellen raised an eyebrow. Potentially. If they took the money under false pretenses with no intention to repay, that could indeed constitute fraud. Why do you ask? I discovered something while organizing my documentation. In the emails about that final investment disaster, my father had mentioned other investors, friends and family who had also put in money. I'd followed that thread and found that my parents had essentially been running an informal Ponzi scheme, borrowing from one person to pay another, always with the promise of returns that never materialized. Ellen's interest was piqued. That would change our approach significantly. Do you have evidence of this? Some, I admitted. Not enough yet, but I know where to look. Ellen laid out a strategic approach. We'd need to document everything meticulously, identify other potential victims, and build a comprehensive case. She warned me that this would be a lengthy process. I didn't care. I was in this for the long haul. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Ellen and a financial investigator she recommended. We traced money flows, identified potential victims, and built a comprehensive picture of my parents' financial misconduct. The investigator found evidence of at least 7 other people who had invested with my father over the past 5 years, none of whom had received their promised returns. The demand letter was drafted, but not yet sent. We needed one more piece of the puzzle. That piece fell into place when Olivia called me, concerned about my sudden disappearance from family events. I took a calculated risk and confided in her about my investigation. Her response shocked me. I knew something was off. Dad asked me for $15,000 last year for some guaranteed investment opportunity. I didn't have it, so I never found out what it was. Would you be willing to help me? I asked carefully. I'm not just doing this for myself anymore. After some hesitation, she agreed. Olivia had access to our parents' home when they were away and was able to photograph financial documents they'd carelessly left in their home office. What we found was damning. A list of investors with payment schedules, none of which had been fulfilled, and evidence of systematic misrepresentation of their financial ventures. Most disturbing was a notebook where my father had meticulously tracked which family members and friends were easy marks for loans. Next to my name, he'd written reliable source and minimal questioning. Ellen reviewed the new evidence with growing confidence. This changes everything. We're not just looking at civil recovery anymore. There's potential for criminal charges. The demand letter was revised and expanded. Total amount, $42,500 plus accrued interest. Terms, full repayment within 30 days or legal action, including potential criminal complaints. I also set up meetings with 2 of the other investors we'd identified. One was my dad's former colleague, now retired, who had put in $30,000 for what he thought was a real estate investment. The other was a distant cousin who had contributed $15,000 to a guaranteed growth fund that never materialized. Both were angry, but neither had taken action, assuming they were the only ones who had been duped. By the time we were finished, we had documented evidence of over $150,000 in fraudulent investments across 9 different individuals, spanning 6 years. Ellen advised forming a coalition of victims to strengthen our case. There's power in numbers, she explained, and it demonstrates a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. The letter was sent by certified mail on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was blowing up. Mom, how could you do this to your own family? After everything we've sacrificed for you. Dad, you ungrateful little shit. We gave you everything. Charlie, you're dead to us, you backstabbing asshole. I didn't respond to any of them. Ellen had advised against direct communication once legal proceedings began. Olivia called. They're freaking out. Dad's talking about fighting it in court. Charlie is threatening to teach you a lesson, whatever that means. They don't have a leg to stand on, and they know it, I told her. This is just the beginning. 2 days later, Charlie showed up at my apartment. I could smell the booze from 10 feet away. You need to drop this bullshit right now, he slurred, pushing past me into my living room. He looked like he'd been on a bender since the letter arrived. You need to leave, I replied, keeping my distance. This isn't up for discussion. You think you can just mess over Mom and Dad like this? We'll destroy you. You're nothing but a traitor who fixes rich people's cars. Mom and Dad? Or just your meal ticket? I asked calmly. He charged at me then, swinging wildly. I stepped aside and he stumbled past me, crashing into my coffee table. Before he could recover, I had my phone out. Leave now, or I'm calling the cops and adding assault to the list of family accomplishments. This isn't over, he spat, struggling to his feet. You think you're so much better than us? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. He left, slamming the door so hard. I immediately called Ellen and filed for a restraining order. The security camera in my apartment hallway had captured the entire confrontation. My parents' official response came through their attorney the following week. They claimed the money had been gifts, not loans. They cited family obligation and tried to counter with a defamation claim. Real classy move from the people who taught me about responsibility. Ellen was unimpressed. Their position is weak. We have documentation, witnesses, and a clear pattern. The restraining order against your brother strengthens our case by demonstrating the hostile environment. But I wasn't satisfied with just a legal victory. I wanted them to understand exactly what they had done, not just to me, but to everyone they'd manipulated over the years. I compiled a comprehensive document detailing their financial misconduct, including statements from other victims we'd identified, and sent copies to every family member, close friend, and business associate in their circle. I also sent copies to the hospital board and the country club they so desperately wanted to join. The reaction was swift and devastating. Friends they'd borrowed from and never repaid suddenly started asking questions. The hospital initiated an ethics review of my mother's financial conduct. The country club quietly removed their application from consideration. Their social standing, the thing they valued above all else, crumbled almost overnight. I received a threatening letter from their lawyer. That's expected, Ellen told me. They're lashing out. It means we have them on the run. We proceeded to court. My parents didn't expect me to follow through. They thought I'd cave under family pressure like I always had. They were wrong. The process dragged on for nearly 6 months with delays and legal maneuvering, but the evidence was overwhelming, particularly once other victims came forward to testify. The details that emerged during discovery were even more damning than we'd initially found. My father had been maintaining 2 sets of books for years. There were email exchanges where they explicitly discussed using my money to fund Charlie's business ventures, knowing full well they had no intention of repaying me. The judge reviewed everything and ruled in my favor. These were clearly loans, not gifts, she declared. The court orders repayment of the full amount of $42,500 plus statutory interest. My parents looked shell-shocked. Their lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. I knew what he was telling them. They didn't have that kind of liquid cash. Your Honor, their lawyer said, my clients request a reasonable payment plan. The judge delivered her ruling, ordering my parents to repay the full amount based on the documented evidence and the harassment demonstrated by the restraining order. She gave them 14 days to submit a reasonable payment plan, making it clear that failure to comply would result in forced liquidation of their assets to satisfy the judgment. Their attorney immediately began whispering to them, likely explaining the severity of their situation. They left the courthouse without looking at me. My revenge wasn't complete yet, but victory was within reach. 2 weeks later, Olivia called to tell me our parents had put their house on the market. They had to, she said. They can't get another loan. Everyone knows what they did now. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just the certainty that justice was finally being served. The flying monkeys descended next. Relatives I rarely spoke to sent messages about how I was destroying the family. My mother's colleagues left voicemails about forgiveness and mental health. Some family friends even showed up at the garage, trying to talk sense into me. One actually asked if I could look at their car while they were there. The audacity never stops. I didn't engage with any of them. The restraining order against Charlie was extended after he sent a series of threatening texts. My parents tried to play the health card. Dad suddenly had stress-induced hypertension. I didn't respond to that either. Funny how his health wasn't a concern when he was spending my money. The social fallout was just as significant as the financial one. Word spread quickly throughout their social circle about what they'd done. People who had looked up to them for years now avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Mom's nursing friends, who she'd ruled over like a queen bee for decades, suddenly stopped including her in group texts. Dad's weekly golf game evaporated overnight. What really got to them wasn't the money. It was the loss of status. These were people who had built their entire identities around being respected community figures. Now they were known as frauds who had exploited their own son. 2 months later, their house sold for significantly less than market value because they needed a quick sale. They moved into a small apartment and, according to Olivia, were struggling to adjust to their reduced circumstances. Charlie had been forced to get an actual full-time job at a warehouse and move into a shared apartment now that the bank of Mom and Dad was closed. What a tragedy. I used the repaid money as a down payment on a small 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. Jess moved in with me, and we spent weekends fixing it up together. The house needed work, but it had potential. And more importantly, it was ours, built on honest money and actual effort. Life was good, for the first time in years. Without the constant drain of my parents' demands, I was able to focus on building my own future. I got certified in high-performance European engines, which bumped my salary another $15,000. Jess got promoted to lead developer at her company. We adopted a German Shepherd mix from the local shelter and named him Wrench. On weekends, when I wasn't working on the house, I made progress on my Porsche restoration project, a 1978 911 SC I'd picked up for a song because the engine was shot. 4 months after the court ruling, Olivia called with an update that almost made me laugh. Charlie had convinced my parents to invest their remaining savings into his latest scheme, some NFT project that was guaranteed to 10x their money. Within weeks, the entire investment vanished. The revolutionary blockchain platform turned out to be vaporware run by a guy operating out of a Caribbean tax haven. Shocker. My parents were now truly broke. The apartment they downgraded to suddenly became unaffordable. Dad's company car had been reclaimed when his former colleagues realized he'd been skimming from client accounts for years. Their credit was destroyed. Their reputation was in shambles. Charlie moved back in with them, turning their two-bedroom apartment into a cramped mess. He blamed everyone but himself for their situation. According to Olivia, he'd already been written up twice at his warehouse job for showing up late and arguing with supervisors. My mother tried calling from different numbers after I blocked hers. "Ronnie, we made mistakes, but we're family," she said in one voicemail. "We're facing eviction. We just need a little help to get back on our feet." I deleted the message without calling back. Dad cornered Marcus at a gas station, begging him to reason with me. Marcus told him exactly where to go and how to get there. Apparently, Dad hadn't expected Marcus to tell him to get lost in broad daylight at a crowded Exxon. Olivia maintained minimal contact with them, but refused to offer financial help. She'd finally seen through their manipulation. The true depths of my parents' financial deception continued to emerge. Two of their former friends who had invested with them filed their own lawsuits. The hospital conducted a full audit of my mother's department and found evidence that she had been manipulating staffing schedules to collect overtime she hadn't worked. Dad's former employer discovered he had been charging personal expenses to company accounts for years. It was like turning over a rock and watching all the bugs scatter. Once the first stone was cast, everyone started looking more closely, and they didn't like what they found. 8 months after the judgment, their situation deteriorated further. They were evicted from their apartment. Charlie had been fired from his job for stealing inventory and was now facing petty theft charges. My parents were couch surfing between increasingly reluctant relatives. Throughout all this, Jess stood by me without question. One night, after finishing the kitchen renovation in our new house, I found her admiring the new quartz countertops. I pulled the ring box from my pocket and placed it on the island. "What do you think about making this arrangement permanent?" I asked. She said yes before I even dropped to one knee. We planned a simple wedding at a mountain resort about 3 hours from town. Invited close friends and people who actually gave a shit about us. Olivia was the only family member on my side who received an invitation. The wedding was scheduled for exactly 1 year after the court judgment. A coincidence, but a satisfying one. Marcus was my best man. A week before the ceremony, my parents found out about the wedding through a mutual friend. The calls started immediately. First my mother, then my father, then random relatives I barely remembered, all insisting that family belongs at weddings. I didn't respond until my father sent a text asking why they weren't invited. I replied with 7 words. "There's no space for you. Limited seating." They didn't try to contact me again. The wedding went perfectly. Olivia cried during the vows. Marcus gave a speech that had everyone laughing. Jess looked incredible. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded entirely by people who wanted the best for me, not what they could take from me.